Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg, as always, here to recap the last week of college basketball, preview the next week of college basketball, which includes conference tournaments because it's March. Greg, how you doing?
I'm sorry, you said it's what month?
It's March.
March! Say it louder!
Okay, Greg just made half of our audience go deaf, so at least you can still watch the games. It's a great time of the year for all of us who have been watching the college basketball seasons all year long. We're going to get to this recap and everything and talk about some of the teams we like as we go along. I know a lot of people may be tuning in for the first time because it is March. First of all, Greg, let's go over what Brad Brownell said last week. We talked about Brad Brownell a lot this year because Clemson was a team who had talent. But maybe wasn't living up to their expectations. And then, we kind of stopped talking about them, had them banned from the podcast for a couple weeks. But he has put himself back in the conversation because he made a statement about, so the Big 12 teams manipulating the net. Now, how this works is they scheduled a bunch of 300 level teams. There's only 360-ish college basketball teams in Division I right now. To make their efficiency numbers look better, the efficiency numbers go into the net, so that would make your net look better. Now, he's not totally wrong. Like I do think there's a world where this is really happening in front of us. But at the end of the day, they still have to play well in those games too, and the scoring margin has to happen that way too. And also, the ACC could do the same thing. It's not something I don't think any of us want to see because we don't want to see our favorite teams or the top teams in the country playing 300 level teams, but it does seem like some food for thought for the committee before they select some teams.
Yeah, I won't rehash anything you just said. I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head. The only thing I kind of would want to expand on is what's good for the sport. And I think when we've been talking about a lot of these teams this year, some of these teams we've been saying like, man, their only good wins are within conference. I think that if we're talking about what's good for the sport, um, there needs to be, I'm not saying we need, power conference on power conference every weekend, but it does feel like those were the games that got highlighted, especially early in the season. So, I would like to see a lot more, you know, power conference teams maybe playing. Maybe you don't have to go play I won't even name a conference because then that's how you end up in somebody's mentions. But you don't have to go play a small conference. Maybe more games against the AAC or more games against and what's the challenge that stopped this year, Joe? There was one of the Big 12 SEC. I can't. There was one that was either this was the last year or last year was the last year. I mean, the more we get rid of that stuff, like the less you know comparative results we have to look at, where you can kind of have that. It's not necessarily transitive property, but things get kind of funky when the only really good wins you have for some teams are in the Big 12, and some of that can be said about the Big 12. Like Brad Brownell pointed out, like the ACC is 9-3 against the Big 12. I mean, we could dive into that, but I mean, like there's something to that. So I think it'd be better for the sport if we got more, big on big matchups. I know we're going to bigger conferences, so it's going to be 18 to 20 conference games for most conferences, and we won't get to see, a lot of Gonzaga, Kentucky in February. But I mean, I think the sport's missing out. Good on those coaches that are willing to schedule like that because it's good for the sport.
Absolutely. I think we went from a system where we were rating teams based on who they played, which was like the RPI system, which I prefer. It's not perfect. There's still chances where you have teams who shouldn't be ranked high be ranked high. But to a new system where it's how you play, if you talk about efficiency and all those things, and to be honest, I don't care if you play the best game of anyone in history. You don't miss a shot against a team who's level 300. If you're Kansas or something like that, if you play, a team from the MEAC or SWAC or the NEC or any of these conferences, and you win by 50 points, I do not think you're a better team than if you go beat the number 2 team in the country by 1 point. I like that those things should balance out. That's why I say analytics are a tool. They should not be, something that's driving the net, and we should also have more clarity about the net, which we've said multiple times as we go along. So some truth to it. We'll see. I hope this doesn't affect things. College football, they schedule games way far out in advance. College basketball, hopefully next year we don't see teams scheduling really late and having a terrible college basketball regular season because of it.
Joe, if you could affect metrics or our however you want to call it, whatever way, basically let me give you two options. You can either say with the net efficiency factors in as it does now, or not at all. You can't like you can't like, okay, we'll tune down the dial and it affects it less. If you could either have it the way it is now, or efficiency has nothing to do with our net rankings, which are, by all means, I mean, they're our resume metric that we use right now when we're talking Q1, Q2. I would just rather not have it in there. I don't know if you feel differently, but I mean, what are your thoughts?
I'd say not have it in there at all. I don't think it matters if you play well in a loss. I mean, it really shouldn't matter. I think if you win, that's most important. But we're also, Greg, in the minority of college basketball analysts, fans, when we say that, because a lot of them are very much so into how you play and the analytics, and it's a very analytical based sport, probably the most analytical sport other than maybe baseball, which has a lot more reason to be analytical than I think college basketball does.
Well, I think the thing everybody can agree on is something needs to be tweaked. Like, however you look at it. I mean, like, forget like how the net itself is put. I mean, I know we've talked about for a couple of years now, like a game against the 75th ranked team in the net on the road is the same as the game against the first rank. Like, like that's there's got to be, and I don't have like the secret formula, but I think everyone can agree like what we have now is not perfect. Analytics is, I mean, this is part of the college basketball world we live in. Like Joe's already said on this pod, it's become almost baseball-ish, but I think everybody can get on the same page. Like something's got to be tweaked.
I think so. And the only thing that like they're not talking about changing the net. They're thinking about adding teams to the tournament where it's going to be like, okay, this isn't solving the issue. I mean, I guess we'll still probably be watching college basketball if they expand to 96 teams, 80 teams, whatever they end up deciding. But evaluating teams will come out of the equation. That's not something we want either. It's just, you know, a lot of the changes that are being proposed aren't the ones that will fix what are currently wrong with the sport. Adding more teams, like a 14 and 14 team right now, or I guess 16 and 15 team right now, maybe shouldn't be in the tournament, and they're trying to solve that to get more at-large bids for the bigger conferences rather than actually figuring out what's good for the sport. And what's good for the sport is having games that are scheduled that are meaningful in the non-conference, having teams that you kind of know what the criteria to make the tournament, even if there's some anomalies because it is a committee, like at least know what you're shooting for. There's no one even knows what to shoot for anymore. I think John Calipari's even said that before with seeding for the NCAA tournament as well. Like, hey, do the conference tournaments matter? Because sometimes we win our conference tournament championship on Sunday and get a big quad one win, and then you don't move up a seed line because of it. Where if that game happened in mid-February, you would probably move up a seed line bracketology wise. So lots to be figured out there. There is some truth to Brad Brownell's comments. As funny as it is Brad Brownell being the guy to point that out. But let's get to our recap, Greg. Let's start off with last Sunday. We did not get to it while we were recording because it was actually going on. I think we actually even mentioned the game. But Ohio State gets a win over Michigan State. And Michigan State's still in the tournament right now, probably like a 10 seed most bracketology. I did bracketology today. I think it was like a 10 seed. Ohio State is playing their way on the bubble. Now, they're not on the first four outline. They're probably not on the next four outline. But there's a path to the NCAA tournament for Jake Diebler, which is absolutely crazy.
I mean, if you'd have told me that, I would have just been like, what are you talking about? So Michigan State side, they've got a home game against Northwestern and at IU. I would advise them to win both of those games, especially since you said looking at up around a 10 seed right now. They lose that game at home against Northwestern, they're going to be in some real trouble. You might be able to get away with losing at Indiana. Maybe if you don't lose like the first or second, Big Ten tournament game. I mean, they're still in a bit of a spot. Hearing Ohio State in tournament, is just, it's odd, but I mean, they've climbed all the way to 60th in the net, all they really have is Rutgers left. Well, not all they really have. All they have is Rutgers left in their regular season schedule. So if they're going to get anything done, it's going to have to be in the Big Ten tournament. I mean, I would think like we're not saying, just from what we're looking at, a team that's ranked 60th in the net. I mean, they don't have to win the entire tournament. I mean, it's probably need to get to, I don't know what, at least at minimum the semifinals and not lose to Rutgers to even be in that consideration. Now, a lot of it's going to depend on how the bracket breaks down and what kind of matchups they get and who they beat. If they get a really good win early on, we'll just have to see. But it's just, are we gonna see another coach get elevated from assistant to I can't imagine with their resources but if he all like, here's the weird thing is like if they win like the Big Ten tournament, like it's gonna kind of be that Rodney Terry situation where people are gonna start whispering. It's gonna be like, oh, you gotta consider him, you gotta consider him. But like it's Ohio State, like
So I listened to Mark Titus's podcast last week. Mark Titus formerly played for Ohio State. Mentioned that Jake Diebler basically has no shot at the job, no matter what happens. Even if they make the tournament, they'd have to. I think they might have to go to like a Final Four for him to get the job, just because how much money's in the program and who they're going to get. Maybe a mistake that they're dodging in a way. Texas did not dodge that mistake as much as I wanted Rodney Terry to get the job, but also mentioned that the Thad Matta back to Ohio State stuff is kind of real. Not in the sense that Matta would go back, but there's people at Ohio State who want to go back and hire Matta who have money. So you might be hearing some rumors about that. I think Thad Matta's happy at Butler. He's got a team that's growing, and I don't think he wants to go back to Ohio State after, didn't end well there after because of health issues. But yeah, I think Jake Diebler's out. I don't think Thad Matta's the answer, as much as fun as that might be.
well, for what it's worth, Joe, I don't know if we've mentioned this on here yet, but the leading candidate is Sean Miller, allegedly, for the Ohio State. I mean, I've seen it like 3 or 4 places right now, so that's all. He's obviously still coaching right now, so it's all it's all supposition, but still, allegedly, he's who they want. So, but
Well,
I mean, who they want and who might take the job might be 2 different lists. So,
true. Greg McDermott just signing an extension right now, or negotiating an extension right now with Creighton. He was also on the list of a guy who could leave, but he seems pretty happy with if he does get that extension to stay at Creighton. So a lot to be figured out for Ohio State. I am excited to watch. I think there's one of the teams that you can watch maybe in the early portion of next week in the conference tournaments to say, hey, there's actually some real life things on the line here. So a lot of times a lot of people won't tune into conference tournament week until Thursday or Friday. But even if some of these teams get Wednesday games or Thursday games, even people tune out for, Ohio State might be a team to watch. All right, on Monday, we have Baylor beating TCU in a rivalry game. Greg, I don't have anything to add to this one. Baylor is playing pretty well right now. TCU, only 3 quad 1 wins is really hurting their resume, but if the tournament ended today, they're in. I'm not going to say collapse and they wouldn't be out, but they're not a lock technically, but they're in a pretty good spot.
yeah, they're definitely going to get that Big 12 bump just from the schedule that they've had. I don't know, Joe, if you want to peek at what else they have left this week before the Big 12 tournament. I'll maybe focus a little bit on the Baylor side, but it kind of feels like I'm going to say the same thing we've kind of already said about them. Is what we really like to see is they got different dudes that can get it done, any day of the week. I mean, I feel like last week we talked about a game where Ray J. Dennis and Nunn each had over 20. And this game, it's Misi, Jacoby Walter, and Bridges all with over 15. So they've climbed back up defensively, Joe, all the way to 67th.
Mm-hmm.
So it's starting to get in that conversation where, if they get to, I don't know, what do you think? Like sub 50, sub 45, they might start being like a trendy people picking them in their Final Four kind of deal. I mean, the defense is definitely, like, from a metric standpoint, it's improving, and they only gave up 54 on the road to TCU, so there's that. The Baylor team, we've liked them. We both kind of liked, they of course have their flaws, but we've liked them since the beginning of the year, and it took some work to get this team ready and rolling, but everybody's taking their lumps, and I mean, this has got to be up there, and they're probably a second tier team, definitely not on our UConn, Purdue tier, not on our Houston tier, but maybe in that second tier of maybe our top 10, top 12 teams right now.
Yeah, I was not high on them preseason, but once we started seeing them play, I think we both kind of bought in, and I think it's a testament to Scott Drew and the job he's doing there. So Baylor going to be a tough team to beat in the NCAA tournament, and as you mentioned, Greg, they're a team that you could slot them into your Final Four. I wouldn't have a huge problem with it. If you slot them in to win the championship, that's where things get dicey. Like we always say, like, hey, they have to be rated this or that in the Ken Palm to win the championship. A lot of teams who don't rank in those numbers, when you start looking at those articles, make the Final Four still. Like Miami's defense was terrible last year, and they made the Final Four. So if you want to put Baylor in your Final Four, I wouldn't have a huge issue depending on the bracket. We'll talk about our bracket picks too in a couple weeks here. But TCU has at West Virginia and at home against UCF. Probably want to avoid those losses, but again, I think they're like a 9 seed in my bracketology today. Like they would have to lose maybe both to be really on the bubble. So good for them, for Jamie Dixon and doing a good job at his alma mater there. We'll move on, Greg. We have to go to Tuesday, Kentucky and Mississippi State. And now this is right after I had said I've never been more confident in Kentucky. But I would have been just as confident if they lost this game. It was if people who actually watch the game might see something different than what the numbers spat out. But comes down, Kentucky struggles first half. Mississippi State kind of hits them in the mouth and they're hitting shots. Tolu Smith has a pretty big first half for the Mississippi State, and then Josh Hubbard goes off second half. He finishes with 34 points. It was Josh Hubbard versus Reed Shepherd. It was, I mean, can't miss TV. I mean, going into the game, you're not thinking that's going to be the case, but watching it, you're watching this go back and forth, and it is, I think, objectively one of the better games of the college basketball season. Reed Shepherd takes over down the stretch, really helps them get back. He finishes with 32 points, 7 assists, and DJ Wagner gets the ball at the end, and Coach Cal doesn't call a timeout and says, DJ, just go make something happen. DJ gets stopped on his drive, passes to Reed Shepherd, and we see maybe the most awkward game-winning floater you'll ever see, but it goes in. Kentucky wins. I know the fan base would be in a panic if Kentucky lost this one. With how physical Mississippi State is and how on fire Josh Hubbard was, hitting shots that he has, even him, who's very talented, has no business hitting, all I can do is put my hands up and say, man, if they won that game, good for them. But good one for Kentucky. The problem is, we're not going to get to their second game of the week. It's not something we'll recap against Arkansas. They struggled in that one too, and their defensive efficiency is way down again. So they'll have to focus up.
Yeah, if I'd have given you this like score sheet or this box score during the preseason and been like, yeah, Josh Hubbard, a freshman from Mississippi State, and Reed Shepherd, a freshman from Kentucky, are both going to have 30 in this game, you thought it was an episode of the Twilight Zone or something. But I mean, it makes sense now. I know we've talked about Mississippi State a little bit, and Josh Hubbard was coming off the bench for a while, moved into the starting lineup. I'm not sure when. I don't watch every Mississippi State game, but caught a bunch of this game and obviously the end. Reed Shepherd, obviously, with his family acumen and whatnot, is just he's just filling out and becoming one of the biggest stories. I saw a couple of several different columnists did some specials on him this weekend, from more than one place. So I like both of these teams. I don't know where you have Mississippi State right now. I cannot quit Kentucky, even though right now they're sitting at 96 in Ken Palm defensive efficiency. You just can't. You just can't get me to quit this team. They have every ability to win at least 4 games in the tournament. The defense might be what keeps them from being a national title contender at this point, but this team, just like we just talked about Baylor, can do it from several different ways. I mean, Justin Edwards had 2 points in this game. Wasn't it last week that he had his game of the year or whatever? This is just the same thing, man. They got about 6-7 dudes that could do it, definitely, and that's not even including some of the role players on the team. So it's hard to quit this team. The defense, was climbing back up. Would still like to see it. Maybe if they show us something in the SEC tournament. I don't know what they got left this week, but you couldn't force me to quit on this team. They have too many weapons.
That might be the issue, is they have too many weapons. It's good, but they inserted Trey Mitchell back into the lineup against Arkansas. He wasn't ready to play with that injury and almost cost him the game against a bad Arkansas team. But I think a lot of the efficiency numbers are skewed. Like, the perimeter defense isn't great, but Josh Hubbard just hits these crazy contested shots. That hurts your efficiency numbers. Like, and I don't know how you account for that, because he doesn't hit those shots against other teams. Same with, Wade Taylor and Tyrese Radford are not shooting well from 3 this year. Kentucky goes and plays them, Texas A&M, and they go off against Kentucky. So partially defense, partially just guys seem to hit shots against Kentucky, and that's not fun for a Kentucky fan. I can tell you that from the heart, but it's maybe the numbers are lying a little bit to us, so maybe just a little bit. So I also like what you said, Greg. I think that every single player on this team, star, role player, has had a moment this year where they have stepped up. That's not something you always see. Like, there's some guys on some teams where it's like they're a glue guy. They get 5 points, and like every night they'll give you 5 points no matter what you ask, and they'll do well. Justin Edwards had his game. Adu Thiero's had some big games. Ugo Onyenso, one of the 7-footers, has had some good games. Z's had some good games. They come and go, and there's not really much of consistency. But here's the thing: when you have some off nights, Reed Shepherd takes over, 32.7 assists. Against Arkansas, Rob Dillingham had accounted for the last 20 Kentucky points with a pass or a shot. So just so many things. I can't quit this team either. I think the defense is coming, and I think it is getting better just watching it with my eyes. There's not as many mental lapses, but the efficiency numbers are getting worse, so you have to account for that.
The only player I think, Joe, that we want to point out that's been pretty consistent most of the year is Antonio Reeves, and it makes sense. I mean, he's the veteran player. He's the transfer. He's everything you're looking for in college basketball. He's like the only one that, you and I have both said kind of quietly, like if you put his numbers up against some of our player of the year candidates, of course he's in an offense that scores a lot. Of course he's got a lot of weapons around him, but still he at least deserves consideration, but which he's not going to get from the media just because of his situation. He's, really that keystone, that capstone piece that kind of ties this team together while he's putting up nearly 20 points a game.
Yeah, I think a part of it is the media narrative. I think that it's like a highlight scouting thing. Like you see Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepard, and it's like, oh my god, these guys are awesome. And to be fair, they are. But like, gun to my head, am I going to say they're the best players on this team? Best per prospect, sure. I think Antonio Reeves' consistency warrants some love. And also, Coach Calipari said he's the best perimeter defender too. I'm not sure if I agree with that, but the fact that he's in the conversation with the way he's scoring, crazy. Should be in line to be a first-team All-American. I don't know if he's going to get it. We know Dalton Connect and Zach Edey are the two locks there, but maybe RJ Davis too, but he definitely deserves some consideration as well. Been a very good player for them. Greg, let's go to another game from Tuesday. We have BYU and Kansas. BYU wins this one. Kevin McCullar still out in this game. Now, he did come back on Saturday for Kansas. We're going to talk about that game later. But this is just a totally different Kansas team when they don't have Kevin McCullar, and it showed here with BYU. BYU can hit some shots, like we said. This is I don't want to say it's panic mode for Kansas, because they are, missing Kevin McCullar in some of these games, but it's something we've already seen. Like the issues that we saw early in the season are still there for Kansas, and it's still the reason why I don't know if they're ready for a deep run. And the fact that they have the most Big 12 losses since Roy Williams' first year is concerning.
No, I was gonna trivia time you on that if you didn't bring it up, but 8 losses that first year with Roy in the Big 12. So Joe is correct. The most losses in Big 12 play for Kansas since then. The one thing that scares me is this isn't like a story of BYU came in and shot 55% from the 3-point line. 13 of 34 has got to be like right. I don't know. I don't have the percentage in front of me. That's got to be right around like 35%. 13 of 39 would be a third. So maybe it is close to like 38% or something like that. But that's not like electrifying. Like that's a decent team percentage, but it's not like the most electrifying thing. So yes, they're missing Kevin McCullar, but they still didn't play well. And not only did they not play well, they did play well at home. And this team just forget this team this year. This program doesn't lose at home a lot, like hardly ever. So, but I mean, it's just, this is the glaring, like, hey, this is what you have to consider when you're looking at Kansas. You're going to play not back-to-backs, but you're going to be playing, Thursday, Saturday, or Friday, Sunday, and then come back and do it again the next week. This is what happens to them if they miss, whether it's Dickinson, McCullar, maybe even KJ Adams. Obviously, Furphy's come along. It just shows you lose one of those pieces, and this is what you get. So, I mean, I feel like we repeat ourselves with a lot of these teams, but like here's your case study of what you might get from Kansas. And we could also look up, and I'm at the point where I'm kind of out on this, but like we absolutely could look up and Kansas is in the Final Four because they stayed healthy and they got good matchups. Like it's not that they don't have the talent. It's what we've been saying all year. They don't have the depth that would make me. We're not saying it can't happen. It's just unless like the bracket breaks some weird way. Like it's not going to be my first choice to pick just because it's they don't have what we're looking for. Obviously anything can happen in the tournament. It's a single elimination tournament, but they don't have what we're looking for when you're trying to pick who's going to my Final Four, who's going to my title game, who's going to the second weekend. I'm not saying this isn't a second weekend team, but we just try and pick out like here's our parameters. Here's what we look for, kind of thing.
Yeah, they are. Again, the same issues are haunting them. Kevin McCullar being back helps, but they're looking more like that team. This is several years ago. I mean, probably like almost 20 now, where they lost to Bucknell in the first round. They were the 3 seed and they lost to a 14 seed Bucknell. I mean, they're on a 3 line right now, basically. And people seem to be like, the media seems to be like covering it up a little bit, like, oh, they don't have Kevin McCullough. But like, my point is that that's the thing. Is like they could have someone in foul trouble. They could have someone hurt. They could have him having a bad night. And from the sounds of it, even though he's playing, he may not be 100% healthy the rest of the year. So it's again, I'm leaning. You're right. They can make the Final Four. This year's crazy, especially, but I'm leaning towards first round upset over making the Final Four if I had to put money on it. All right, next up we have Texas beating Texas Tech 81 to 69. Now this is big for Texas. This more solidifies their spot in the field. They're likely going to be in now. I have them up to a 9 seed today in the latest bracketology. Texas Tech was a little bit higher up. They're moving down to a 7 seed this week. I mean, both teams in that second, third tier of the Big 12, and doesn't really affect much other than seeding for the Big 12 tournament. But good for Texas that they, I wouldn't say are a virtual lock to make the NCAA tournament. I would say virtual lock.
Yeah, yeah, Joe. Texas has Baylor tonight. I didn't put it in our picks for the week. We can maybe chit chat a little bit right now. So you're thinking Texas is in at the moment. They're sitting at 27th in the net. Yeah. So basically, top 30 means you're pretty much in. I don't know that. I think when we looked it up, like 33 was the best net, or 31 was the best net that ever got left out. And reminder that teams as high as 40, 50, even low 60s have made it in. It's just up to the committee at that point. So I mean, it's at Baylor. Like I in my mind have zero idea of, or zero thought towards Texas winning this game, but they've put themselves at least in a good situation in a conference where they've got this week they've got Baylor and they've got at home against Oklahoma. Those are two decent games. Oklahoma right now at home would be a Q2 opportunity for them, and then obviously we'll get a couple of opportunities at minimum one in the Big 12 tournament. So what do you think they have to do? Do you think they're in it? Let's say they lose to Baylor, they lose to Oklahoma, and they lose their first Big 12 tournament game. Do you think it's still scary, or nope, they're locked for the tournament just because it's not whatever that third loss isn't going to be a bad one?
Yeah, I think they're, like I said, virtual lock. I mean, we might see some bid stealers really push them towards the bubble, but as things sit now, I'd say they're probably in. I think they're like on that 9 line. You think like you have to drop at least 8 spots at that point to miss the tournament when you take into account not large bids and the playing games as well. So yeah, if they lose these games, maybe they're in the playing game, but they're still in the tournament. I think things could change, but that's just how I see it right now. And Greg, you mentioned some of the teams. If you're top, I think it was it 33. I think is what we ended up coming up with.
I think it was either 31 or 33, I believe.
So there's going to be some debates here because Wake Forest follows up that win against Duke and goes and loses to Notre Dame, who is not a very good team this year. Now, really quickly on Notre Dame, they have a really young backcourt who's going to be very good next year with Burton and Shrewsbury. Not a good team this year. Wake Forest, I think they're 31 in the net right now. They're in my playing game. Like they're hanging on by a thread and one bid sealer and they're out. They have one quad one win, I believe, right now. Not much else on the resume.
Yeah, I'm happy that you're keeping Wake Forest in there. It's just this is one of those teams. This is not as much of a team as Texas A&M that I'd really like to see in the tournament, but I just think this is a fun team. Hunter South is a great story. If you guys haven't been following along, the Forbes family has been going through a lot between his wife, I believe it was a stroke she had in the off season. So there's just a lot going on with this program. Of course, we had, just last week we had the court. There are so many storylines with this team, but Joe's right. I mean, that win against Duke is their only quad one win at the moment. They did have a quad one win at home against Florida, but that popped to a quad two. That's really borderline. I don't think any of their current away wins could pop in. So yeah, they're probably going to be sitting with one quad one win going into the ACC tournament, because this week they've got home Georgia Tech and home against Clemson, which actually for the moment is a quad one opportunity. So I'd say it's you got to win those two games, and then we'll just have to see what kind of the way the ACC tournament breaks out. But I would not advise them losing their first game, possibly even their second game, if you don't want to be sweating out Selection Sunday.
Yeah, looking like they're going to be squarely on the bubble right now. So the last game we'll do from Tuesday, Greg, we have Nevada and Colorado State. Now, both these teams are solidly in right now, so we don't need to talk about resume. Nevada's like an 8, Colorado State's like a 6 seed if you're looking at it. But basically, just talking about the game and the shot here. Colorado State ties it up late, and then Gerard Lucas nails a half court shot to send Nevada to the win, winning 77-74. So again, good Mountain West basketball. And we'll talk more about Mountain West as we go along here. But yeah, I think good win for Nevada, and again, they can move up to a couple seed lines here. They're the 8 seed right now. I think they can really make some noise here in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up right now because but DraftKings is being it's being funky. It's only showing like half my screen, but somebody had as Joe and I have not mentioned this on the pod yet, but Ohio got rid of being able to bet on player props. So you're still getting these bonuses from DraftKings for anybody that likes to bet, where it's like bet on the game of the night or whatever, and it's a 50% bonus. And somebody bet on Nevada to win this game because you can't bet player props anymore. And somebody was up very late watching this game and watched him win $40 on a half court shot. So that's a feeling. That's a pretty good feeling. But I was sweating it out. They basically darn near threw that game away. So I was a little more tuned into this game, not just because it was Mountain West. I just said, all right, like it was just one of those value things. Like, okay, like I could see Nevada winning this game, and for like a good chunk of the game, they were up quite a bit, and I thought, all right, I was just folding laundry. That's the only reason I had it on. I was getting ready to go to bed, and then they started coming back, and I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm not going to turn it off now. And thankfully, I stayed up long enough. Joe knows that I tweeted the shot out off our Twitter account as soon as it happened, because that's at least shot of the month, probably, candidate for one of the better shots of the year. We'll just have to see what else we get. Of course, March always brings us some good buzzer beaters, but yeah, I was a little more tuned into that game than our general listening audience.
Look at that, Ohio lawmakers putting money into Greg's pocket by making him bet on the actual game rather than the prop bets. All right, let's go to Wednesday, one of the best games of the week, at least we thought, and it turned out to be pretty good. Tennessee, 92 over Auburn, 84. Dalton Connect goes off again, 39 points in this one. For me, Tennessee proving what, Greg, I think, like mutually, I said this last week, mutually, I think the team that we've agreed on the most in this podcast since we started this season was Tennessee being a legit title contender. Proving it once again. Auburn, I mean, I have them as a 5 seed right now, Greg, but like this resume arguably could be worse than some of the teams who are like down there at like the 7 and 8 range. It's pretty bare.
Well, Joe, if I remember correctly, in our not our the preview, the top 16 preview, they were a 4 seed, were they not? This was literally like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But even then, like the week before that, I remember this being a thing. They had no quadrant 1 wins, like literally a week or two before that. Now the only one they're sitting on at the moment is Bama at home. It's worth noting that they still have no losses outside of Q1. That's pretty good, but they don't have a ton of good wins. They obviously kept this game close. I don't know, man. Like I like this team. I liked this team when I saw them at the beginning of the year play Baylor. They played Baylor tough. I like their defensive tenacity. I just, they're currently 5th in the country in adjusted defense and 14th in adjusted offense. Like that's darn near like in that category of, hey man, you could pick them for winning the national title because of like those parameters or whatever. But like, I don't have that. I do like this team, but like I am nowhere near picking this team to win the national title. It's weird because if you start like, again, this is one of those situations where if you start looking at the analytics, people that look at sheets all day are gonna be like, I'm picking this team to win the national championship. And you know what? Like I'm saying this now, so of course they're gonna win the national championship, and I'm gonna eat crow. So whatever. But like I just watching this team, Broom is having a great year. He is not when he's got single coverage inside, he is absolutely dominant. He's when he does get double covered, he's doing a great job of kicking the ball out, getting shooters good shots. But this team, it's just weird to me to see the 14, the offensive, because it feels like they struggle on offense sometimes. It just does. And obviously the defense is fifth, but they give up 90 to Tennessee, although who hasn't? So I don't know. I like, this is definitely a team that can win 2 or 3 games. Outside shot at the Final Four. Of course, now that I'm saying that again, they're going to make the national title game just because I said that. But it's weird because like all your numbers would tell you like, yeah, you got to pick this team to win the whole thing. But because there's currently, as far as I could tell, there's no one sitting. I think, what do we say, Joe? Top 10 in both is like that's your big thing, and there's no one sitting in that right now. So
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not picking Auburn to go very far at all. I think, again, like some conferences that were mentioned, maybe the non-conference schedule really helped their efficiency numbers. You ever think about that? Because they played a pretty BS non-conference schedule, and they even lost to Appalachian State, who's Appalachian State's doing fine. They're the number 1 seed in the Sun Belt Conference, but still, I don't know. It's just one of those things where I am not comfortable with them. You have to beat some good teams, and they've had some opportunities too. Now,
and it's worth mentioning they got cake this week left. They got at Missouri and at home against Georgia. So like, either of those two pop up as a close game or a loss, it's going to be worry time.
yeah, I think those guards concern me too. I think what you have in Broom, but having another go-to guy on the perimeter, like it just seems like different guys step up, and they have almost like two different lineups that come in for each other that we talked about earlier in the season. So it's hard to get in a rhythm. It's hard to see who's going to step up and be that guy for Auburn this season. But still, a good job by Bruce Pearl. With this, it's always a tough job at Auburn, and he's done a pretty good job. Just can't always get to the point where you're a national contender there. All right, we'll move on to Thursday, Greg. Pac-12 action here. Utah beat Stanford. They should beat Stanford. Stanford's under 500. Just got to mention that Utah's still on the outside looking in. So for me, I'd say just watch out what they do these next 2 weeks. They're in my first 4 out right now. A lot of injuries have plagued them. If they get healthy, maybe they can go on a run, but I don't have anything to add to that. They did what they should have done.
Yeah, I know, Joe. We kind of, you had mentioned them earlier in the year, so we want to keep an eye on this team. It's just unfortunate for them that they're in the Pac-12. So, I don't know. I don't have a ton to add to this. I just, they're just going to be a team to see. It's going to be what do they do next week, and honestly, they're going to be also if they struggle a little bit in the conference tournament or they lose early, they're going to be looking around at the rest of the nation and saying what happens. Every bid stealer for them is going to be like walking on thin ice.
Yeah, they better get some wins this week before the conference tournament too, because again, first 4 out, and they aren't the first one out. They aren't the second one out. They're rolling down pretty into a bad territory. All right, let's go to Friday, Greg. We have Dayton and Loyola. You were at this game, Greg, on Friday, and you said the atmosphere was pretty wild. And
it was wild.
Okay, well, tell us about the game.
So the stadium only seats about 5,000, but you could have told me there were 100,000 people in there. They were loud, and when I bought tickets to this game, it was still non-conference time. It was like maybe early November. Kind of didn't really have any idea that Loyola was going to be this good, and now they're at the moment top 2. I think Richmond still got a game on them in the A10 standings, but the game itself it felt like it's another one of those stadiums where the fans are kind of there's not a huge space between the fans and the court. It's a bowl. There's no area where there's like anything that ascends or whatever. So I mean the sound just funnels down and it was intense. Both teams played suffocating defense. At least I know Joe, you had it on TV, but it felt like at times getting an open shot was like pulling teeth until the last possession of the game. Braden Norris would find somebody in the corner. I can't even remember who it was at this point, but or maybe somebody found him. Like I honestly, it was so loud in there I could barely hear myself think. So I just they found it was like a 2-point game, and they found somebody in the corner. And that put them up 5. And at that point, with like 15 seconds left, it was pretty much done. But I haven't looked at their resume at all. I mean, this is
pretty good job by Drew Valentine. I feel like we've talked about some other coaches, but this team kind of came out of nowhere. Now they're sitting at 90th in the net, so yeah, so zero chance at the tournament unless they win the A10 tournament, and that's again the only case where we would be looking at a two-bid A10 is if either Richmond or Loyola won the A10 tournament, and then of course we'd have to hope that you don't think I asked you this question last week. They're still sitting at 21st in the net. That was a Q2 loss. I mean, you still don't think there's anything to worry about, any reason to you still think they're a virtual lock at this point?
Yeah, they're a 6 seed. Again, don't advise losing out at this point because they could be on the bubble, and that's when you have people start digging into your resume more. They might see like, hey, you haven't beat a team who's currently in the field, other than the automatic bid from the actually. I guess they haven't beat the automatic bids from the A10 either. So that's alarming. So I will be totally honest. It was fun watching Dayton. It's fun watching Deron Holmes. But even if they do make the tournament, I don't know if I'm picking them, man. I don't know. I'd take some of these 11 seeds. I think it's just the resume is not great. It's good enough to stay at a 6 seed right now. I mean, hey, they were for me up at like a 4 at certain points this year, which is huge for an A10 team. But another loss this week. Down to 7, down to 8. I don't know.
Here's you made a great point. This is a great time to point out they have 3 Q1 wins, which count as 3 Q1 wins, and there's a very good chance that none of those teams make the tournament. St. John's is their best win, and it's looking like they may or may not. They're definitely a bubble team. We'll just have to see on them. But like you're telling me your best, like those are your peak, wins, and they're against 3 teams that might not even. That just shows you, not to backtrack a little bit, but that just shows you where we're at with this system. Like that's a bit odd to me.
Yeah, it's definitely odd, but it's also one of those things where you need to schedule some of these games because that will take into account, like it's kind of a catch-22. Like you want to be efficient and play those 300 teams, it seems like, but you also want to have games against teams in the field, and maybe you don't schedule one against every single game against Kansas and Kentucky and Duke, and it's very hard for a mid-major to do that. But maybe you schedule some games against some top teams. Like, what if they would have scheduled Indiana State this year, or something like, you know what I mean, like something like that, where you can get some wins. So I won't say that their schedule is bad by design, but you have teams like Cincinnati who are in the mix for a while. That was a big win. It's looking less and less like a big win for him right now. So that's something to consider. So yeah, I don't know. Dayton was fun to watch, but it could be a team where if you're sitting there and like, hey, next week they lose a game, they're at the 7 line, they're playing a 10-seeded, just for whatever, Nebraska or 10-seeded FAU. I don't know. I'm probably going the other way with that one. So just something to keep in mind there. But no, they're definitely going to be in the tournament unless they really just, I don't know, poop the bed the last couple games of the season, which I don't think they're going to do. Moving on to Saturday, Greg, we have Florida and South Carolina. That was the first game of the day that was really enticing. It was at noon. South Carolina wins it 82-76. Michi Johnson, 25 points, really steps up. These two teams, to me, again, start talking more about resumes these last couple weeks because this is when it actually matters. But 6 seed for South Carolina, 7 seed for Florida. They probably flipped and flopped the last couple weeks. They're very, I would say, not similar resumes and how the numbers look with quad 1 wins and stuff, but very similar seed lines when it all comes out. So good win for South Carolina. A lot of these teams are battling for the top 4 seeds in the SEC tournament. That's the more important thing. So getting this win and staying at 4 SEC losses puts them in good position to maybe have one of those top 4 seeds.
Yeah, I still don't know what I think of South Carolina in terms of like good team, but I still don't know what I'm going to do with them. So they're probably, what you got them in the 5 range right now?
6.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's another team that, again, I worry about the offense sometimes. And Colin Murray-Boyles has come along. He was coming off the bench for a while. Now he's in the starting lineup. That's a freshman. That gives them an inside presence that I do like. Michi's had a couple of good games. BJ Max had a couple of good games. Jacoby Wright still coming off the bench for them. I want to say he's probably averaging in the ballpark of 8 to 10 points a game. It says he's only averaging 6, but I feel like every game I've watched, he's been in the 8 to 10 range. So obviously there's been games where he's had below that, but I worry about the offense with this team. So when I'm looking ahead and trying to think, what am I going to do with this team? They're 43rd in Ken Palm, 52nd in adjusted offense. They're 42nd in defense. I feel like I've felt personally better things about their defense, but again, analytics just a tool to kind of help you focus in on what you're watching. Florida side of things, this is not what I didn't expect much from this team this year. So good on Golden for putting this together. We've already mentioned, a couple of their key players, Clayton and whatnot. I think, did they have, maybe I'm misremembering this. Did they have an injury or something early in the season? I might be thinking of something else. I think I'm mixing up the Kugel kid with the guy from Houston that just got hurt, the Kugler. I think that's why I think those names similar is what's making me think that. But I don't know, Joe. What do you think? It's tournament time, and these what do you got Florida at? Probably 7-8 right now.
7. Yeah, Florida has a better chance of going on the run, in my opinion. I think South Carolina's
Okay,
good team, but had a good regular season, had some good wins, but I would say Florida's shot making is a difference. Walter Clayton was in the tournament last year with Iona, has some tournament experience. I like the fact that they rebound. So while they are a lower seed, I think playing in the second round, if they can win their first game against a 2 seed, I think they might be able to win that game depending on who it might be. Let's go to next game up, Greg. We have Kansas and Baylor. We already kind of mentioned Kansas, so I won't spend too much time on this. Kevin McCullar did play in this game, but they lost to Baylor. We also talked about Baylor, too. Same thing here. Ray J. Dennis, 19 points, 10 assists. Big game for him. And McCullar did play. He shot 9 of 19. It didn't look like he was 100%. Like I mentioned, the rumors out there are that he's just not going to be 100% this whole year. So that just puts a lot of concern on the whole Kansas thing for right now. But if he can get healthier, hopefully by the Big 12 tournament, maybe they can go on a run there and kind of prove that he can at least be more of a factor. He played, again, didn't play the worst game in the world, but did not look 100% when you watched him.
Yeah, I feel like we don't need to spend a ton of time on this because the only thing I'm going to say about both teams is stuff that I've already said about both teams. Kansas lacks some depth. Baylor has the ability for different guys to do it on different days. I mean, that's finally teams that we actually know what they are, but it's even more complex with that because with Kansas, it's like we know what they are when they're missing a piece, but when they have everyone, it's like what. Okay, so let's put this to bed. Let's say they stay completely healthy. Kansas stays completely healthy. They have all their best players. What is their absolute ceiling? Can they win the national title if they stay completely healthy? I say no. I don't think they're in that conversation. What do you think?
I mean, I don't want to doubt a guy like Bill Self, but I don't even see them getting past the Elite Eight. I don't think they can win 2 games in a row, maybe 3, and they've played some tough games, but can you imagine some of the matchups we get in the Elite Eight some years? Like if they had to face off with they're a 3 seed right now, so say they had to play, Purdue, UConn, Houston, Tennessee, even in the Sweet 16, they had to play like a 2 seed like UNC right now. Like, it just doesn't instill much faith in me that they can get the job done.
I know, Joe, but don't forget they beat UConn this year. Like when they're at their best,
right.
They've beaten UConn and Tennessee this year. When they're at their best, they can beat teams that we have in our upper echelon.
Right, but they don't have to win just one game. They have to win multiple games in a row. That's the difference here. And I think there's just something wrong with this team. I think other teams have gotten better, and I think Bill Self is moving parts together to try to get things to working. And Johnny Furphy came along and was all of a sudden a first-round draft pick because he was playing so well. Now he's kind of fading a little bit. I don't think this team is built for March. I think ceiling, I guess, if you had absolute ceiling, they play out of their minds, the Final Four. But I would say if you're in your brackets, again, I'm more closely picking them to be out in the first round than I am making a Final Four. So we'll see what the bracket comes up. Maybe the matchups are great and I changed my mind, but it's hard for me to believe in this team overall. Greg, let's go Creighton and Marquette now. Tyler Kolek was out for this game. He's going to miss the last 2 regular season games for Marquette, so that's something to track. Marquette got whooped, being that Tyler Kolek was out, 89-75. Creighton has, put up some good performances over the last couple weeks. They did have a dud back last week as well, but starting to play up to their potential, I think, through the last month of the season, and a team that I think looks like what we thought they were at the start of the year.
Yeah, Shireman having himself another great year. Kalkbrenner seems like he's finally contributing. I know early on it was You know, they were focusing on a lot of the outside players and a lot of jump shots. I still look at this team and, you know, Ashworth is fine, but you just wonder how good would this Creighton team be if Ryan Nemhart was still with the team. And you know, it looks like at the moment, we haven't gotten to Gonzaga, but it looks like at the moment both teams are going to get in, both Creighton and Gonzaga. But you know, you just sometimes you wonder what's going on in his head. Joe has obviously ad nauseum talked about his issues with Marquette, and you know, now we see it's weird because they've won games with Kolek having off days, and now he's completely out. And you know, I mean, there was a game on the road to Creighton. I mean, like that's fine, but I just, you know, this was a team that at the beginning of the year, the returning basically everyone besides Olivia Max Prosper, and you know, I know they've, you know, kind of had their struggles. There was no. Here's the only thing you could talk about is no Kolek, no Osta Iguodaro, and they lose by 14 on the road to Creighton. I mean, like that's something. Like that's not nothing. That's two starters. So, you know, but I mean, Creighton, that's not anything they can do. They just have to take care of business. This was just what they did. So, I would be worried about picking this team. I think they're solid enough that they're going to be a second weekend team, but I don't know what I would want to do. I would want to see the bracket before I did anything else. Creighton obviously has been a little up and down. This is another team that it's like, I feel like they're good enough to win a couple of games. Obviously, last year they were literally a foul call away from making the Final Four for the first time in program history, but I still don't know that I can depend on this team to do anything other than like maybe make the Sweet 16 and like that's it. It would have to be like something perfect for me to pick them to the Elite Eight, and I just can't imagine a scenario where I'm picking this team in my Final Four.
I differ a little bit. I think they're actually pretty good. Stephen Ashworth the last month has been on fire. I don't want Ryan Nembhard. Screw him. He's gone. He had a bad game in this one. Who cares? Stephen Ashworth's been playing well. I think they've got a pretty good team. I have very high hopes for Creighton. I wouldn't say they're definitely going to be making it to the Sweet 16 in my bracket, but that is more a product of what year it is and how the schedule's been for college basketball teams this year than anything. I'm pretty high on them. I do think Marquette has the same issues that we've had in past years. But when you take into account you have Baylor Shireman and Ryan Kalkbrenner inside, Stephen Ashworth is really coming along. I kind of like Creighton. Again, maybe Sweet 16 is where they end up dying in my bracket, but I kind of like how they played. So we'll see how that goes. Tennessee and Alabama. This one was a interesting one because Connect did not have a good game, but was able to come through at the end for Tennessee. Exactly what you want to see. 81-74. Now, most games, holding a team to 74 points, not that impressive. But Alabama and the way they play offense, pretty good defensive performance. And when you have someone like Connect who can show up at the right moment, good for them. They are trending towards possibly being a 1 seed. I had them in a 1 seed in my bracketology today. Going to be battling it out with Arizona and North Carolina for that last spot in the 1 line.
Yeah, and I've heard it tossed around, but we'll just mention it here. This would be the first time in Tennessee history. A little surprising to me. If they were able to get the 1 seed, it's not something Tennessee has done as a program before. I feel like we've had some really good Tennessee teams. Obviously the women's program is also good, but this will be the first time for the men's program. If they were able to get that done, it's going to be a fight for that 4th 1 seed. Joe already said it. You hold on the road, you hold Bama to 74 points. That's pretty darn good. Sitting at 3rd in defensive efficiency right now. You're able to win a game with 81 points against Bama, and Dalton Connect's only got 13 of those. I mean, that's pretty. There's a lot to like about this. 18 from Ziegler in this game. I feel like at times he's struggled. I know Gainey's been on and off, so he's just another option for them. I do feel like they're probably about 8 deep. Sometimes Barnes will bring off Estrella every once in a while, and Freddie DeLone saw some time early in the year, but that may have been more just throwing him out there to see what they had in him. They do have some. It's weird because they have some options. They play great defense, but I almost look like at this team, and I'm just like, man, yes, they win this game without Dalton Connect having a stellar game, but I don't know that they could do this like a couple of times. I think they did this once, and that's great, and it lets us know that they have that capacity. But like, I still think if they go into the tournament, like you cannot depend on this. You cannot depend on 18 from Ziegler and double digits from Adu and you know Vescovi is he's one of their better shooters, so maybe you can count on him to have a game here or there. But this is not how if they're winning, if they're making their way to the Final Four, I don't think this is how they're doing it. Like when you look at a team like for counterpoint, like when you look at a team like Baylor, I'm like, I see about 6 ways they could get it done in the tournament. I don't think this is how, if they are making it to the Final Four, I don't think this is how they're doing it. I think it's Dalton Connect minimum putting up 20 to 22 a game and the rest of the guys falling in line.
That's true. You don't think you could have one bad game in the tournament where this helps them?
No. I'm not saying that. So they obviously say we can do this.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is, if this team is going to make it to the Final Four, it's he can have a bad game, singular. I think if he has 2, then it's probably, hey, the second time he had a bad game, they got caught and they're done. Okay. Wherever that is in the tournament.
That's fair. I just think he's probably had like one singular down game in SEC play with how many 30-point games he's had. So I'm with you. I don't think he can have 2 bad games, especially with the competition he's playing. Maybe the first round, I guess you could have a bad game. Maybe first, second round. But further you get, you need him to be good. So, but yeah, I think Tennessee is possible Final Four pick for me. Not something I thought I'd say. Possible number 1 seed, like you said. I'm not surprised by that. They've not had a good basketball program in their history. They've had a couple good spurts where Bruce Pearl was there, and even with Rick Barnes, Admiral Schofield, Grant Williams team, but it's just not the top of the.
You're gonna go through names and not mention Chris Lofton.
I mean,
come on, man.
Like I just said Bruce Pearl years. I mean, anyway, they've had some good teams. They never had a really great team in college basketball. That's what's been holding them. They never made a Final Four. Never had a 1 seed. Like there's no success there in terms of postseason or getting a 1 seed. So I'm not too surprised by that. I just think the history is not there. Now, Greg, let's go to the last game. We're going to recap the week though. We have Gonzaga and St. Mary's. Now, game largely didn't mean anything after results earlier in the week. Gonzaga beat San Francisco. These 2 teams are the top 2 seeds in the WCC tournament, which means they both get byes to the semifinals, which is a pretty unique conference tournament structure that we've talked about a little bit before. In this game, Gonzaga, Ryan Nembahar did have a good game, 20 points, 10 assists, well above his averages for both on the season. I like the way they've come along. They now have 3 quad 1 wins, and they are top 20 in the net right now, so they're definitely in the tournament. And we have our bet, Greg, about who wins the WCC tournament.
Yes, and that is something I think we need to clarify here now and today. What if neither Gonzaga nor St. Mary's wins the WCC tournament? I just want the fine print hammered out so that if one or both of them if one of them makes the title game and the other doesn't, then I don't care what the rules are. I just want them
fair enough,
recorded and down for the people to hear, so that whoever wins, we there's no argument, there's no debate. It's, hey, these are our rules.
If none of them win, we don't win. I mean, I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means we have to do with the bet, but it's how it goes. I said Gonzaga would be the winner of the WCC tournament in the automatic qualifier for the WCC. You said no, St. Mary's. And if it's San Francisco or Santa Clara or someone out of left field, we get nothing. We're all free and clear.
That's fine by me. That's absolutely fine by me. I am excited at the prospect of getting a third matchup and getting it on neutral floor. Although, of course, Gonzaga just took out St. Mary's on their home floor. And the only other thing we would want to mention about this, and this, I'll credit Matt Norlander for this. He mentioned this loss by St. Mary's means we get 0 undefeated teams in conference play this year. Usually, you maybe get 1 or 2. St. Mary's was the last remaining undefeated team in conference play. We now have none.
Well, McNeese State let us down in that regard too. They were 15-1 in conference, so got to figure that one out. We're gonna go to our picks for the week. Now, what we're gonna do, because we've been talking for almost an hour already, is rapid fire conference tournament picks. Maybe a sentence at most, maybe just a team. Honestly, if you just want to pick a team, honestly, that's great. We're gonna go down in order of how ESPN has the conference tournaments and their start dates. We're going to cut it off at about 10 or so because the other ones don't start until next week. We may not recap who wins these conference tournaments. We may just be, hey, this is the team that won it in 2 weeks in the bracket. Hey, the OVC champ, they're the 16 seed in this region, and we're talking about them now once we get to that point. Because honestly, I don't want to recap a million conference tournaments, but we do want to get our picks in. So let's get with this. Let's get started with it. OVC, Greg.
All right, let's see. We got another interesting bracket, kind of like the WCC. I'm just trying to look and see if there's a team that I have heard anything about this year. I don't know how much OVC basketball you've been watching, Joe. I've not been watching a ton.
Oh man, this is not rapid fire. Look at this guy.
Let's go Skyhawks. Let's go UT Martin. Just that's
okay.
2 seed. They only got to win 2 games. That's who we'll go with.
All right, I had Little Rock. They've been on the bracketology a lot for me this year, holding down that spot. Greg will have to make sure to put his picks in our combined picks here as we go along too. Big South, Greg.
Let's go High Point. I know it's the 1 seed, but I feel like that's a team that every 5 seconds Rothstein's tweeting about their win streak and whatnot. So we'll go High Point.
I'm going Asheville. I believe they're the 2 seed in that one. Pretty good season for them. Not as much as the past years where they've been in the tournament, but I would love to see High Point in. I think that'd be really good. The MVC. Now, this is one that we have seen teams play. So, Greg, you can go pretty much Indiana State or Drake in terms of the top contenders, or you can go out of left field if you want.
Nah, we'll go Indiana State because we need assurances that we're going to see Robbie Avila in the NCAA tournament. I don't want any questions about it. Indiana State.
Yeah, I don't either. I want to see them. It's more of a cheering interest even than analysis there, but they're also very good. Atlantic Sun is up next, Greg.
So it looks like a reseed tournament, Joe. Kind of almost NFL playoffs ish. Let's go Nashville. Let's go Lipscomb.
All right, they were were they 3 seed in that?
Yeah, it's not all good. Every year it's not all 1 and 2 seeds. You got to pick something.
Yeah, that's hey. I'm going EKU. I'm going to 1 seed in this one. I do have some surprises later on. Sunbelt's up next, Greg.
Let's go. I think this one is either James Madison or App State. James Madison obviously beat Michigan State early in the year. App State beat Auburn in a weird game at home. Let's go App State.
I'm going James Madison. Like what I saw from him earlier in the year, I think they do have some pretty good talent on that roster. Next one up, we have the SoCon.
Samford.
Yep.
They've just been winning all year. I couldn't possibly pick anybody else.
Samford for me too, killing everyone. Let's go to the Horizon League next, Greg. A couple interesting.
Joe,
lists.
you better pick your team, or I'm going to crucify you if you don't.
I'm picking them. Who you
all
taking?
Right, we're both taking Youngstown State. That's a group ride right there.
Kiss of death. First NCAA tournament appearance. Got to see them live in person against Wright State. Jared Calhoun's doing a fantastic job. A lot of transfers on this team. A lot of team guys left the program after last season, and he's doing a really good job. NEC, Greg.
Okay. Now my computer has stopped loading. Why don't you go ahead and give us your pick first?
All right,
because I can't even get the bracket up.
The 1 seed is Central Connecticut State. The 2 seed is Merrimack. Merrimack had held it down for most of the season. I'm going to go Merrimack. I think it'd be a fun story. Hearing Greg Gumpel on Selection Sunday say Merrimack in the tournament is just something I'm cheering for. So I'm going Merrimack.
I am also going to pick Merrimack because if I remember correctly, it was last year or the year before that it was the FDU year, correct? Because they won the tournament, but they weren't eligible. So that would have been them in that slot. So let's pick Merrimack to go ahead and get their first appearance since joining D1.
All right. The next one up, Greg, we have the CAA conference.
If you open up the bracket, it is completely blank on the NCAA site. So we're picking. Oh, you know who's in this? I'll pick Wilmington. Who else are you gonna pick? Because we already know they beat Kentucky this year. So let's pick UNC Wilmington.
You got my pick as well. I mean, you could have also gone with Charleston or Drexel or Hofstra are also at the top of that conference. I went with UNC Wilmington. I did like what I saw out of them, despite it was Kentucky not playing their best as well. All right, WCC, Greg, we just mentioned it. We have our bet on it. Are you sticking with the St. Mary's pick?
I'm going to pick Pacific to come as – no, I'm going to pick St. Mary's. Just got to stick with it.
Picking a team that fired their head coach already. Wow, okay.
For the record, I was obviously joking. I guess
Right.
Joe's not taking humor today.
I didn't think that you would. I thought you were going to make even more of a joke, saying, "Yeah, we're going to have no head coach and win the whole thing. That'd be great." Sometimes you fire a coach. Sometimes the team goes on a run. I'm going Gonzaga this one. As said from the start, I like their talent. I think they're figuring it out. They've switched up the starting lineup now. It's a little bit different. I think they're good. All right, and the Summit League, one of the most fun ones to watch. Greg, a lot of those teams that are in the Dakotas and in the Montana areas. Who are you going with?
Let's just go. Let's just go Kansas City.
Okay.
That's UMKC, I believe. It's listed as Kansas City, but that I believe would be referred to as UMKC.
I think they rebranded, buddy. I'm sorry. I think they are just Kansas
Oh, they
City.
did? Oh, man. See, this is when my wife will come home and say, man, I thought you had a podcast. You're supposed to know this stuff.
I thought you had a podcast. I'm going the Jackrabbits. Never bet against the Jackrabbits. No Mike Dom on this team, but that's all right. All right, so that's the picks so far. We'll make sure to pick the rest of the conference tournaments in much of the same fashion, probably a little bit longer explanations for the bigger conference tournaments. Just wanted to get those all in. Greg, we're going to go to our picks for regular conference games the rest of the way here. Let's start with Tuesday. We have Purdue at Illinois.
I feel like even though this is a road game, that Illinois defense has been struggling lately. Again, they haven't lost any bad games lately. I'll take Purdue to win on the road.
All right, I'm taking Illinois at home. I think this is a different team. I do think they're gearing up.
I'm fine with that pick. I'm not saying this is necessarily a 50-50 pick 'em, but I don't think you're nuts at all for picking that.
I'd hope so. I mean, I think it's a good pick. I think they're coming along. I think they're actually playing really good basketball. They had the Terrence Shannon thing in the middle of the season, but they're coming back along. So going Illinois with that one. Next one up, we have Tennessee at South Carolina on Wednesday.
So I am going to pick Tennessee, but if everyone will go all the way back to January 30th, they lost to South Carolina at home and only put up 59 points. So there is precedent for this, and they did not win, but that's over a month ago. I'm going to pick Tennessee and just go with the team that I feel like's been rolling.
All right, I'm going Tennessee as well. I do think they're a different team now. I do think South Carolina's a different team, maybe in a worse way now. Still a good team, but just not the same that they were when they were on a roll. So yeah, I'm going to go Tennessee. I think Dalton Connect will have a good game after not maybe playing the best in the last game. Saturday, we have Kansas and Houston at 4 p.m.
I'm also struggling with this one. If it was at Kansas, I would probably lean. I'm gonna take Houston. That would be another conference loss for Kansas. So I believe that would be, what would that be? That'd be 8. There's 7 right now. That would be 8, which is wild, but it's in the context of this year, it's kind of not. But I'll take Houston. I'll take them at home. They did lose another piece. Joseph Tugler. Joe and I have already talked about since Terrence Arsenault went down. They are slightly thin. Losing some role players doesn't help, but still their core pieces are still there. So for now, Jamal Shedd's one of the better point guards in the nation right now. I'll take Houston at home.
Yeah, 3 players out for the season for Houston from guys who played minutes. I mean, maybe not the most minutes, but they played minutes. So very, very thin and maybe in the same position as Kansas. But I like Houston's players on the floor right now better than Kansas's. The guys in the rotation, I should say. And I think at home they get the win. This will be a very big game. I mean, joining the Big 12, you get to host Kansas in the last game of the regular season. When they schedule your game for the last game of the regular season against a perennial power, you know that you're kind of like on the up and coming. They want to have those TV ratings, get everyone ready for March. All right, last game we're going to pick Kentucky at Tennessee.
I plead the 5th.
I can pick it if you want.
I just like, I have no idea in this game. Like, my heart says Kentucky, but because you're you and you say that would be the KOD, I'll take Tennessee.
I'm going Kentucky. This is a much different team. Like I said, I've never been more in on them, in spite of the defensive efficiency dropping. Different guys stepping up every night. I think they are more prepared for a Tennessee game. They are as close to healthy as they've been all year long. Trey Mitchell did play. He's not 100%, but last times the game didn't have DJ Wagner against Tennessee. That's huge. DJ Wagner is the guy who can go get tough buckets. And against Tennessee, you needed guys who can go to the rack and get tough buckets, can take contact on and score. Taking Kentucky, I think if they win this game, this puts them in a position to maybe play all their way up to a 2 seed when it's all said and done. A lot of work to be done before that. There's currently a 4 seed, but I'll go Kentucky. I think last year they won at Tennessee, one of their biggest wins of the season when they did not have the best season. They ended up with the 6 seed. They can do the same thing this year, despite Tennessee being better. Kentucky's also a lot better, too. All right, Greg, any final thoughts?
Yeah, you probably see I got that little note in there. I'm trying to find the exact verbiage so we can read it, but there was a column this week. It looks like from one of the local writers in Louisville. I can't find the exact verbiage, but basically the stat is that there was a time early in Louisville's history. It was I don't know if it was in the 1920s or something like. It was. In 1913, 14 and 15. So 1913, 1914, 1915. Louisville did not have a coach. They had no coach. They just had players. I guess Pete Rose kind of deal where somebody was the leader. And the team winning percentage was 360, 36%. Kenny Payne's win percentage is 200. So they were actually better. And granted, 1913, no 3-point line, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But they were actually better without a coach than Kenny Payne. Just something I saw across my feed this week. And I was like, that's one of our more interesting stats. I feel like that's something we have to mention. We don't need to go into a discussion about Louisville because we've already talked about them ad nauseum, but that was a wild one to me. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
1913, brother, you're saying no 3-point line. They were wearing.
I know.
They were throwing like granny shots up at the basket. This isn't even basketball, so
it wasn't even an NCAA tournament.
No, there wasn't. So yeah, it was good stat. I saw that as well. Good stat. Louisville is going to be making some changes, and hopefully from the top bottom with their whole basketball organization and how things have gone the last, I don't know, 7-8 years or so, I would say. That's something that needs to change. I don't have any final thoughts. I will remind everyone to like and subscribe as we go into March. We will be back next week doing our recap of this week of conference games, maybe a little bit of recap of what's happened in conference tournaments if anything big happens, and then we'll preview the rest of the conference tournaments again in the similar manner to what we did with these. We'll just kind of like not pick every game. That'd be kind of redundant, but we'll go, hey, Joe thinks Kentucky's win the SEC tournament. Shocker. Greg thinks Dayton's going to win the A-10 tournament. Shocker. We'll just talk about that, reasons why, and go through that. So for now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.